Perfect. All right. So this is a timely little session. I had originally intended to do this next Thursday in our community call, but with that being the week before Thanksgiving, believe it or not, we're actually going to talk more about mindful eating strategies and ways, let me turn my actual treadmill off, and ways to navigate the Thanksgiving holiday without worrying about weighing our food and tracking precisely and things like that. That's something that a lot of you guys had requested that we do. And so it was a great suggestion. So we're going to do that. And so I went ahead and just moved this up. But just based on the feedback sheets and check-ins and things like that, I think that this is a much needed training. So I'm actually happy that we are moving this up a week. Just a couple announcements before I get into the coaching material for this evening. We do have another call again next Tuesday. We have a special guest on that call. Super excited about that. We're going to talk about emotional eating, boundaries, and things like that that are important around the holidays. Again, we have a community call next week. So next week we actually have two calls. The community call on Thursday at 7 o'clock, we're going to talk about mindful eating. That's just going to be me. And then the week of Thanksgiving, we also have a call on Tuesday. So we have several calls back to back. I also have something that I have put together for you guys for the holiday season. I'm going to be unveiling that a little bit more in the coming week. A way to streamline some of these things, to make things a little bit more accessible as we move into the holidays, to lower the barrier to entry as low as possible, get to that lowest hanging fruit to make sure that you are 100% successful for the next couple of months and to get all the way through into the new year. So tonight we're going to talk about fat loss fallacies and weight loss versus fat loss. So this is an important topic. So let's talk about some of the reasons that the scale goes up and the reasons that the scale fluctuates. So really briefly, just to recap, I recommend that when we're using weight as data, because that's what it is, number is just data, that we weigh 4 to 7 times per week. And we do that first thing in the morning after we've gone to the bathroom as few clothes as possible. Part of the reason that we do that and part of the reason that we look for the averages in our weight is because we naturally have fluctuations. Men have fluctuations too. Women have a few more fluctuations, and it's perfectly normal. When you are in maintenance, the scale can go up anywhere from 5 to 7 pounds in a 24-hour period as a fluctuation, and that is totally normal to be expected. The scale is very rarely just going to be straight flat line over and over and over again. So here are some reasons that the scale can go up overnight, but it is not body fat. Hormonal fluctuations. So anywhere from a fluctuation in our testosterone, our cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, any kind of hormonal fluctuation can make us retain fluid. Therefore, the scale is going to go up overnight, anywhere, again, upwards of 5 pounds, but it is not body fat. Increased sodium intake. So if we have some salty foods the day before, or, you did a more intense workout and you took in some more electrolytes, increase your sodium that way to replenish. You might have the scale go up the next day, but that is not body fat. Eating later in the day, literally changing the time that you eat dinner can influence what the scale is going to be the next morning, just because there's less time in between having that last meal and when you weigh the next morning. More carbs closer to bedtime. The carbs did not make you gain weight, but carbs are from carbohydrates, which hold on to fluid. So if we're having that closer to bedtime, which sometimes we do for a bedtime snack, carbs can help you get to sleep. Carbs can help you stay asleep, but it can also help us retain fluid overnight, and we haven't had time to process it completely, and therefore the scale may go up the next morning. You didn't sleep well. If we're not resting, if we're not recovering, then that is going to cause the scale to go up. It is not body fat. If you are still having regular cycles and you're ovulating, ovulation can make the scale go up overnight. It is not body fat. If you need to go to the bathroom, constipation, digestive issues, anything like that can make the scale go up. Traveling. So traveling just from a stress response, a cortisol response, just the fact that we tend to retain more fluid when we're traveling, whether it is in the car or an airplane, will make the scale go up. It is not because you totally blew out your calories wherever you were traveling. Alcohol can make the scale go up. It doesn't mean that you automatically gained weight from it overnight. Increased stress. This is we are going to be talking about some science tonight. I'm going to promise to make it as quick and as painless as possible, but I really think it's important for you guys to understand this, to better understand your process and to understand why things happen like they do. And we're going to talk about some of the emotional responses to scale weight as well. But understanding that your adrenals literally sit on top of your kidneys. Your adrenals are the captain of your cortisol, and it's sitting right over your kidneys, which is going to again help you retain fluid when they're inflamed, when stress is increased. Other reasons that the scale can go up overnight, literally if you train a larger muscle group the day before, if you are recovering from an intense workout, that's going to make the scale go up the next day. It is not fat. There are so many reasons the scale can increase. Like, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty good start of the reasons that the scale can go up overnight and reasons to not be concerned, because it is not body fat. So let's talk about where weight loss comes from. So when we think about weight loss, we do connect it to that number on the scale that's glaring back at us the next day. So it's important to know where weight loss can come from, as much as it is important to understand where the quote weight gain, or the scale number going up, comes from. So we literally can lose weight from water weight, right? So if we are releasing fluid, we are starting to get rid of retained fluid and things like that, that will cause the number to come down. It can also go down because we're losing muscle, which is not something that we want, which is why I'm such a big proponent of slow and steady weight loss when the scale is going down. Anytime I see someone that's dropping numbers just really quickly, I'm really concerned about holding on to muscle mass, which is important as we age as women. Our muscle mass starts to decrease pretty rapidly at age 30. Muscle mass is important for hormone production. It's important for energy. So the more muscle mass that we have, the more calories we burn overall. So the more food that we can take in when we're in maintenance. And it also is important for bone density. I'm not going to give like too many personal stories here, because I kind of get on tangents there. But some of you guys know that I went on a mountain biking trip. I guess it's been a little bit over a month now. Had a pretty bad fall. I have a hairline fracture in my forearm on the side that I had surgery on the shoulder last September. And it was really frustrating, because I'm just getting back to doing things with my shoulder. I've actually never had any kind of fracture at all. But talking to the orthopedic doctor, it makes a lot of sense. This arm was completely out of commission for a while. It's still not back to its strength. And so the lack of muscle mass that I have in this arm, and the lack of strength training that I've done, has weakened my bones to the point that they're a little bit more brittle than they were before. So muscle mass is incredibly important, from a structural perspective, from a fat loss perspective, from an energy perspective, from a hormonal perspective. So we actually don't want to lose that. And also, weight can come from virtually anything. It can come from decrease in bone mass density. It can come from getting a haircut. If you have really thick hair and you cut half of it off, you might lose a couple of pounds. It can come from a lot of different things, but of course it can also come from body fat, which is where we actually want to get our weight loss from, not from anything else. So let's talk about what actual fat loss looks like. So this is an interesting statistic that's been studied. This has been studied based off of folks that do quick fad diets and things like that. I've talked to a lot of people that have done like the weight loss clinics, where they go in these big like 30-day things where they're doing these super restrictive diets, and they get some weight loss there. But again, a lot of that is muscle mass. But the thing is, when we're looking at fat loss, it can be a slow process, which can be frustrating if we are hyper focused on that scale number. So I'm going to give you some other ways to look at progress. Most of you guys already know the other ways that we look at progress, but I'm just going to reiterate that to just kind of bring it home. So let's talk about what happens just from a scientific perspective when we are actually losing body fat, not just weight. And so guys, I want to really hound on the fact that when we lose body weight, and when we do it in a way that is appropriate, paying attention to our metabolism, paying attention to our hormones, paying attention to how we want to live our life, that this is not something that we have to worry about rebounding. Whereas if you do something really extreme to take a number on a scale down, you do have to rebound because of all the reasons that I mentioned that the scale would go up. The stress, the cortisol, the hormones, all of that is going to make you rebound. And we're going to talk about your metabolism and your hormones as well. So the fat whoosh is what actually happens. And this does have a scientific name, but we don't need to get into all that. You can just remember the whoosh. So the way this actually works is, and this is, guys, just so that you can recognize how I specifically do things with macro calculations. This is the biggest reason that I do not change macros unless we have been on the same numbers for a minimum of 14 days, preferably closer to 21 days. So on days 1 to 15 of a deficit, so a deficit being that we are taking in less calories than we need to, than we are expending. So that's creating our caloric deficit, which is necessary for a fat loss. We do want to do that in a strategic way, and we're going to go over that in a couple of slides. But days 1 through 5, your fat cells that are holding onto fat currently are going to fill up with water. So just a quick physics lesson, when we lose body fat, the fat doesn't magically go away, doesn't turn into muscle, doesn't turn into anything else. We can't just, they're not just disappearing. So the fat cells have to do something within your body. So the fat cells, when we start to use what is stored, so the fat cells store energy. When we start to use that because we have created a deficit, the fat cells don't disappear, so they start to fill with water. So this is one reason that your water is so important when it comes to fat loss. They will fill with water and they will hold water. Now, we talked about on the previous slide that water weight, holding on to water can be one of the reasons that the scale goes up. This is a common reason why you'll see the scale dip, and then the scale will go back up, and then the scale will dip down and even further. This is exactly what's happening, just on a easy way to explain it. I guess it's an easy way to explain it. So the fat cells are filling with water. That takes 1 to 15 days. And then between day 15 to 21, fat cells collapse. So they essentially whoosh. They will collapse. And that's when we normally see movement on the scale. But more importantly, we're seeing movement in our measurements. We're seeing changes in our progress photos, where our clothes are fitting differently and things like that. That's exactly what happens. And so if you kind of look at your own journey, depending on where you are in the process, you can look at your numbers, you can look at your measurements, you can look at your pictures. This is why we strategically, I recommend measurements 2 to 4 weeks. I'm completely honest with you guys. I'm not going to measure every 2 weeks, but this is why I say 2 weeks, because usually within a 2-week span, we're starting to get some movement in the whoosh, and that's what we're actually looking for. And we know when measurements are changing that it is actually body fat that is changing, because if we can also lose weight, number on the scale, and measurements not change at all, that's when we know that it's coming from muscle mass, fluid, things like that. So again, it is normal for weight to fluctuate up and down. What we get to choose when the weight fluctuates up and down is whether we are going to attach emotion to the data or not. So the reason that I have you guys weigh between 4 and 7 times per week is because of the fluctuations that I mentioned before, but also so that we can have more data. I'm totally fine. Actually, I anticipate weight to go up, weight to go down, go back and forth. That's why the app has that fun little graph in there. That's completely normal. Where we get into trouble is when we let that number, we let that data dictate how we feel about it. So when we have an emotion, so you guys can relate this kind of, to shopping and things like that, we typically buy things from a place of emotion. You can buy from happy, excited emotions, or we can buy from painful emotions. The same when we start to make emotional decisions around food. If you get up on the scale and you let emotion dictate how you're going to feel that day based on the data that piece of equipment, that tool is giving you, then it can influence, we go into what I call F it land. And you're like, well, nothing else matters. I'm a failure. This isn't working, so on and so forth. So it's important that you guys understand how that works. And it's important that you guys recognize when you're starting to attach emotion to data, because it is not helpful in your process. And I tell you that with the full expectation that you're not going to get off this call. You're not going to finish listening to this recording and be like, I'm never going to be emotional about the scale again. That's just not how human nature works. But I want to remind you of that. I actually was suggesting to a client earlier who was having emotional responses to the scale to get on the scale more frequently, because she was fearful of the scale, and to essentially, desensitize herself to the scale. I also had a client a few months ago who told me right when she started that she was not going to be able to get on the scale. She broke up with the scale. It was a really emotional thing for her, which is fine. You guys don't have to weigh at all. There's easier ways to get data, not easier, but more effective data pieces that we can look at. So you don't ever have to weigh if you don't want to. But what she learned about halfway through the program is that if she could step on the scale and utilize it as data information, that it didn't have to be emotional. And then she was able to actually get on the scale, and she was, pleased with her progress there because it was no longer an emotional trigger for her. So just paying attention to when you get on the scale, if it is, sparking some kind of emotion, even if it's excitement, right? Not saying that you can't celebrate that things are going in the right direction. That's not what I'm saying at all, but just start to notice, okay, I'm excited. So what's going to happen if I get on the scale and it's going to go up? Am I going to flip flop the other way? And again, so, we act based on feelings and emotions. So if you're super down based on a number on a scale, are you probably going to make the best decisions for the rest of the day? No, probably not. A lot of times we think that we can guilt and shame ourselves into making better decisions. Like if we get an answer that we don't like, or if we do something that didn't align with our goals in the way that we wanted to, we think that we can guilt and shame ourselves into doing something better, but that is not how it works. Brene Brown specifically researches shame, and there's a bunch of other people that have done psychological research on this. We do not create meaningful change from places of guilt and shame. It is not an effective dial mover. It's just going to perpetuate, I call it the shame tunnel. You're just going to wind up back in that tunnel again and again and again. And we're constantly building or breaking trust with ourselves. So if we are, if we constantly feel like we are going to step on the scale, and this happened this has happened with more than 2 clients over the past week, and this is why this is so timely, getting on the scale and they just feel all this guilt and shame because they almost anticipated validation from getting on the scale to say that they hadn't done things well enough. On the flip side, I've had clients prove to themselves that they felt like they quote messed up, and then been able to step on the scale and it's not reflecting that back. So just be careful what kind of thoughts and belief systems that you have around the data, and catch yourself when you're shaming yourself. Because I'm going to guarantee you that if you shame yourself because the scale went up, it is not going to make you make better decisions throughout the day. And, I'm going to go over that in just a minute, because usually what happens, we either step on the scale, number went up, we were emotional about it. And so we go into, again, what I call F it land, or we go into super restrictive. And I'm going to show you how neither one of those are going to be effective towards hitting your goal. So before we do that, let's talk about some accurate ways to measure progress that have nothing to do with the scale. Again, we have to look at all these things as tools. Macro tracking is a tool. Weighing your food is a tool. Scales are tools. All of these are just tools. We don't attach emotion. We do not attach morality to tools, right? They're just things that give us information, that give us data. We're not a bad person because we did this. There's no good foods, bad foods. All of it. These are just tools. So ways that we can measure progress that have nothing to do with the scale, and these are going to be the best indications of true fat loss. Measurements with a tape measure. I've had so many clients in the past, some people that have had metabolic dysfunctions like PCOS, endometriosis, thyroid dysfunction, Hashimoto's, all kinds of different things there, that have lost very few pounds, but a crap ton of inches. And so, what that's showing is they're just holding on to fluid differently, definitely prioritizing some muscle mass, but we are actually utilizing the energy that has been stored. How your clothing fits. This is actually one of my favorite. I don't recommend getting out, I've had people do this and it's worked out, but this is, again, looking at the guilt and shame of it. It's not my favorite, but people will get out an old pair of jeans. I'm a big fan. If something doesn't fit your body, if something doesn't make you feel good, if something is not comfortable, get rid of it. Again, we do not create change from a place of, okay, I feel bad in these jeans, I'm going to hang them up, I'm going to stare at them, and it's going to shame me into doing something better. That is just not how we work as human beings. It's not helpful. It's not effective. It's not productive. None of the things. So not a fan of that. But if you do have, even a pair of workout pants, pair of pajamas, I don't care what they are, something that you can use as a tool to measure, you can say, okay, these feel a little bit tight. And then every 2 weeks or so, just put the pants on, just put whatever on, and just gauge how you feel in them. That is another way that you can measure progress without doing, tape measure, without doing scale weight, whatever have you. energy, noticing, I did a 21-day challenge not too long ago, 21-day accountability challenge. And some of you guys that are listening to this recording came out of that challenge, but a lot of the things that folks noticed during that challenge was energy production. So noticing that they weren't craving a nap in the afternoon, noticing that they were going to bed at a decent hour, meaning they didn't feel like they needed to crash at 8 p.m. and they were waking up feeling rested. That is a huge indication that we're letting go of things that our body no longer needs and moving in the right direction. Being able to sleep through the night, that's another thing. Endurance, greater endurance. I know some of you guys that are listening to this right now have already reported that on your weekly wins. Having more energy when you're going out to do your activities of daily living, at work, playing with your kids, taking walks in the evenings. All these different ways are ways to measure progress that are actually more important than the scale. Compliance. That's a huge way to measure progress. So you notice when you are able to consistently eat foods that align with your goals, track your macros, hit your macros, and that's exciting and feels good, and you're not feeling like you constantly have to go back and forth between restrict and go all in. That's a huge measurement of progress. Strength, and then lastly, of course, progress photos. Again, there's a client that's currently in the program. She had asked some questions, maybe last week, maybe the week before, regarding whether or not I was concerned that the scale wasn't moving a whole bunch. And I was like, I don't know, are you concerned? And I said, it's time for progress photos. So let's take a look at that. Her progress photos were absolutely incredible. And the scales moved maybe a pound. And so it just shows that there's a lot of progress that is happening, but the scale's not moving as much. And so that goes back to, if we're not checking in, and this is why the weekly wins, the non-scale victories, are such an important part of your sheet. If we're not checking in with that regularly, then we go back into the 96% that are just like, they'll step on the scale, they'll start a nutrition plan, they'll step on the scale for like 7 days. And if the scale hasn't moved, they're like, oh, well, this is not working. Let me move on to the next thing. And then they never get anywhere because it's the same thing. We go for 7 days and it's like, oh, this isn't working. Let's go on to the next thing. So why macros? What do macros have to do with fat loss? What do macros have to do with weight loss? Why is this important? So again, in the portal, there's the macros made easy. We go over protein, carbs, and fat, what they look like, what they do, all those things. So again, by looking at our macros, by prioritizing our protein, we're preserving muscle mass, which is so important for, using energy when we're fueling our muscles, when we're building our muscles. They are utilizing energy. So they're going to utilize those fat stores while you're not working out, literally while you're sleeping. The more muscle mass that you have on your body, the more energy it requires just to keep it functioning. So prioritizing that protein is huge for that. Having the appropriate amount of carbohydrates promotes hormone function. Again, it doesn't matter if you're perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, we still have hormones. We have our thyroid hormone, which is the gas pedal for fat loss. We have cortisol. We have our hunger hormones. We have all kinds of different things that are different from estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. And again, carbs are our brain's a preferred fuel source. So it's going to help us make good decisions. It's going to help lower our stress. It's going to help sleep. And looking at the way we get in our protein, our carbs, and our fats is going to fuel our performance. And I'm not just talking about the gym. Literally, I'm talking about your energy throughout the day. So when we have sustained energy, that's why I tell you guys to divide your protein, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Make sure we're getting protein throughout the day. That's going to fuel our body throughout the day. And then when we're looking at balance, having that little bit of carbs with our protein to get that energy up, to keep that energy stable. It helps us to stabilize our blood sugar, which is a huge cause for crashes, helps prevent insulin resistance, which can be a huge cause for retained belly fat. Helps keep our stress low, helps us, balance our nervous system, which is a huge thing when we're looking at excess belly fat because of that cortisol production. So again, macros are looking at how we're taking in our overall energy throughout the day. And so it's important to look at that. And it's important to find balance in order to be able to do all these things. And then of course, it's also important, which some of you guys that are a little bit newer into the program may not have gotten to the point yet, but it's also important for compliance. So looking at how you break down your macros, it's going to keep you from getting hungry. It's going to keep you from craving. It's going to keep you from wanting to eat all the things that probably aren't the best. And it also teaches you that you can fit in things that maybe, quote, aren't the best, but still make you happy. I call them joy foods. And so all of that is important for compliance. And in order to lose fat loss and in order to have sustained fat loss, we need to be consistent. And so if we can have a way of eating, a way of living that makes us more compliant, then we're going to be more consistent. And therefore, we are going to lose the weight. All right, so this is where we get into a little bit. I know there's a lot of words on here, but I wanted to give you guys a visual. Last call, I tried to do the whiteboard and then it crashed and I lost the whiteboard. So we went back to slides today. So understand your metabolism and hormones to better understand the scale. That's a run-on sentence, but okay, you guys got it. So your metabolism is smarter than we will ever be. Your body never forgets a diet. It never forgets anything. Your body is, so there's a great book, and I know some of you guys are, actual mental health counselors and things like that. And I know you've heard of this book, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score. I'm really fascinated by the trauma response, physical, emotional, mental trauma, and the effect that it has on our metabolism, the effect it has on our hormones, the effect it has on some autoimmune issues and things like that. But it's really interesting. The body stores all kinds of things that even in our, the up top body, the head has forgotten. So it's carefully monitoring our energy intake and our energy output. This is important to recognize because your body is designed to keep you alive. Your body is designed to survive. And the reason that this is important is because so many times we, whether you go to the doctor and your doctor's like, hey, it would be super healthy for you to lose weight. Or, you just get tired of not being able to fit in your jeans, or you just get tired of being tired. What we have to recognize is your body is trying to protect you. Your body is trying to save you. And your body doesn't look in the mirror and say, hey, I'd like to fit in these pants a little bit better. It actually literally does not care. So it's carefully monitoring our energy intake and our energy output. And it's also carefully monitoring stress. This is why consistency is so important. It is so important. So when we go, in previous diets, you guys, you're in this program, you're no longer on a diet. Previous diets would be like, okay, we're going to be super strict. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it starts to slip. Friday, it slips a little bit further. Wednesday, we're all in. And so when you look at that from an overall, like your body taking inventory here, that's incredibly stressful. And it doesn't teach your body to trust that we're going to be consistent with our energy intake. So if we're super inconsistent with our energy intake, we're still going to be pretty consistent with our energy output, the variable being, workouts and things like that. But as far as digestion, brain function, hormone function, all that, it stays pretty consistent. Obviously our basal metabolic rate, your BMR, is going to fluctuate based on your body size and what kind of energy output it has to have for that. But overall, that stays pretty consistent. And then if we're throwing our energy intake in and we're being super inconsistent with that, your body doesn't know whether or not it needs to use energy stores, AKA those fat stores. So looking back at that fat whoosh, or if it needs to hold on to the energy that you're taking in, because you may feed it some more here, or we may, go on to the weekend and then pull it back in. So the more that we can be consistent with our macros, the more we can find balance there, the more trust we're building with our body. So it's like putting pennies into a trust bank. And then as we keep putting those pennies in and in and in, then we can cash out. And the cash out that we're looking for is the fat whoosh or the weight loss that you desire. So it's super important to recognize, when you feel like you need to do extra exercise, when you feel like you need to restrict food, any of those things, you just need to recognize that your body is very carefully taking inventory. Okay, energy in, energy out, and is very carefully monitoring stress. It's also important to recognize that whether your weight loss is for health reasons, for aesthetic reasons, or anything else out there, any reason that you want to lose weight, if you have a strong why attached to it, is completely valid. However, again, it could be the healthiest thing for you in the world to lose, I don't know, 20 pounds. However, your body is still going to perceive that as a stressor. Why? Because your metabolism has adapted to where you currently are now. It's worked really hard to pay attention, take in all these things that are coming in and say, okay, this is what I need to be doing right now. And then when you start to pull away from that, that is immediately a stressor on the body. It's the same with exercise. If you've been sedentary for a long time, it's really, again, all the benefits of muscle. I just did about a month ago a few podcasts. So you can go back and listen to those if you'd like on the Strong Mamas and Macros podcast. I did a whole little thing talking about muscle and exercise and things like that. So it's incredibly beneficial. But again, if you haven't been doing it, no matter how much it's going to help you in the long run, be able to stay pain-free, be able to keep up with your kids, your grandkids, whatever, it's a stressor. And so we have to take this into consideration. Again, if you feel like you overdid it on Friday night, the answer is not to then overcompensate by doing extra workouts on the weekend. Again, eating too little is stressful. Eating too much is stressful. Exercising too little can be stressful. Exercising too much can be stressful. That's why we really want to meet in the middle. So we can modulate energy in and energy out through different strategies. The most effective and the least stressful are in this order: your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is any activity that you're doing outside of a planned workout, eating or sleeping. So I'm literally standing on my desk treadmill right now. I've been in calls all day. So this has been a lifesaver today to be able to get that movement in, but looking at how you're moving more than you're just sitting. And so I literally have had folks in this program that have, fractured feet or had knee surgery and things like that, to where they've had to sit. But, even just fidgeting with your hands, just utilizing energy rather than just sitting back. Stress management is the second one. So noticing when you can relieve and manage your stress accordingly. So looking at things that are within your control and without your control, and trying to focus on things that are within your control. Looking at, doing things like breath work, journaling, meditation, whatever is a stress reliever for you guys. I mean, I do a lot of those things. I also knit. That's a stress reliever for me. Hobbies and things like that, spending time with pets. Saw a funny thing. One of my mentors, Dr. Jay Tita, he had posted something on Instagram yesterday about his dog, Stoey. And he's like, pets are a great stress reliever unless your dog is a pain in the ass. And I have a couple of those. But I do have dogs that are stress relievers as well. Horses are a stress reliever for me. All those things can help you lower your stress level, which is going to help lower your cortisol response, which is going to allow your body to effectively use energy and shed the weight that you want to do. Sleep, making sure that you're recovering, really prioritizing. Of course, 7 to 8 hours of sleep is great, but really working towards restful sleep. I know some of you guys are in this program right now because that was one of your big pain points. That's one of your big struggles. So looking at how all this can start to influence your sleep and help you get more quality, restful sleep, and how that's going to influence your results. I was literally having a conversation in the app with a client this morning. She was so thrilled that she'd had a stressful week last week and she wasn't sleeping as much. And I'd, in her feedback yesterday, said, hey, I'd really like to get that sleep back up. And she did last night, in the scale, she had a whoosh, and she's like, it's amazing the difference between not getting sleep and actually getting quality sleep. And then the next thing is macros. Again, looking at your balance of your meals, making sure that we're prioritizing that protein. We have a good balance of protein, carbs, and fats at each meal. Again, we went over why that's effective, looking at your muscle mass, looking at how we're getting the fuel throughout the day, as well as looking at that compliance. And then lastly is calories. That's why, some of you guys that have been in the program for a while, you probably have been at the same calories, and we've just kind of tweaked how we're getting that in. That's because that's my job. So one of my teachers, he calls nutrition coaches adaptation managers. And so what we're trying to do is we're looking at all the ways that your body is going to adapt to different stimuli. And so looking at it from this perspective, you can go to Weight Watchers, you can go to a weight loss clinic or whatever. And the first thing that they're going to do is slash your calories. That literally is the last thing that I'm going to do, because as you guys knew before you came into this program, I look at everything from the perspective of how are your hormones going to respond? How is your metabolism going to respond? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be the deciding factor as to the results that you get and whether or not you can sustain those results. And I don't believe that you're getting good results unless you can sustain them. So fluctuations in stress and energy influence your thyroid. So again, I said on a previous slide, that is the gas pedal for fat loss. So when we are under a lot of stress, our thyroid down regulates. Again, I don't want to, go into too many personal stories, but, some of you guys that are a little bit newer may not know my personal story, but before I did this full time, I worked in the medical field. I actually worked third shift for quite some time. I also had a history as a trainer, over exercising, under eating. I've literally done all the things to the point that I put myself into a state of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease that has to do with the thyroid. I also have other coach friends that have done the same, and so it's just really interesting. They've done so many studies now on, again, trauma, PTSD, but also trauma from diets and low carb and all those things that are actually causing lasting metabolic dysfunction. The Biggest Loser study is a really, really interesting one if you guys just want to kind of geek out on that stuff. But, the people in The Biggest Loser did so much metabolic damage that they couldn't recover from it. Fortunately, I have my own coach to hold me accountable and good doctors. And so we've been working on thyroid function, my Hashimoto's for a while. I also had adrenal dysfunction. Guys, you name it, I've done it. I bottomed out all my reproductive hormones. So when I talk about, fluctuations in stress and energy and how it can influence, I'm talking about, the way we exercise, the way we eat. And that is literally how I got into this field. That is why I'm so passionate about educating myself, educating you, and supporting you and making good choices for your health and your future. And we can avoid a lot of systemic issues by being strategic. So again, going back to, I know you guys get so tired of, you're like, oh, hey, the scale's not doing exactly what I want to do. Can we cut my calories? And I'm like, no, let's walk more. I've started sharing some memes online. I don't even know this guy, but he started making all these funny memes about, people talking like, hey, I want to lose more weight, I'm going to slash calories. And then, somebody in the background like, hey, just walk more. And they crack me up. So I like sharing those. But again, being strategic, like looking at, can we move more? And sometimes the answer is no, right? Can we reduce some stress? Can we look at some things that, aren't serving us, and can we remove them? Unfortunately, we can't, remove family members. Unfortunately, we can't all just like quit jobs. People think all the time, I do love what I do, but sometimes my job is really stressful. Today's been a really long day, and it's actually been a pretty stressful day. It hasn't been my favorite day to work, but looking at, I can't quit, couldn't just like not show up tonight. So those are things that we have to look at. But when I do look at things like that, and some of you guys know because I've told you this, if you're having a super stressful day at work, like maybe the best option for you isn't to come home and work out. Maybe the best option for you is to like take a walk and take some deep breaths. So taking all these into consideration and being really strategic, not just looking at what we want in the moment, but what we want long term. So in the moment, we may think that extra workout is going to be helpful for making the scale move down, but long term, when we're looking at how your metabolism and your body is adapting to stress, perceiving the stress, it can be really unhelpful. Looking at how we can get more sleep. Sometimes if we're in a different season of life, sometimes sleep is more important than getting up early for a workout. It just is. Actually exercise is the very last thing, and I didn't even put it on here, is the last thing that we can really work on as far as adapting. Why? Because we only have so many hours in the day. Whatever you do to lose weight, you're going to have to do that and then some to maintain the weight. So looking at this, what do we want to be able to do, to have to do more of? Like, no, we don't want to have to like eat 1,300 calories because we lost weight on 1,200 calories. We don't want to have to, exercise twice a day for 7 days because we went all out on exercise for 7 days and we use that for our energy deficit. That's not how we want to do things. And just looking at the longevity of your weight loss, do you want, just because your schedule changes, your body changes and things like that, do you want to continue having to go do high intensity workouts 3 times a day for the rest of your life? I can tell you, I was somebody that worked out 3 times a day, got shredded, and then I got busy training other people, working, doing things with my kids, and the weight just piled back on because I couldn't sustain that anymore. So what we can sustain is making sure that we're moving, managing our stress, sleeping, balanced meals, and then lastly, we can manage a reasonable caloric deficit that doesn't leave us super hungry. So that's what I mean by strategic, and we can avoid some of these thyroid dysfunctions, adrenal dysfunction, hormone dysfunction, and we can actually start to repair it. Hormonal changes in response to stress and energy fluctuations subsequently impact our response to future stimuli from food and exercise. So this is talking, again, going back to your metabolism never forgets a diet. Your body never forgets a diet. So putting pennies in that trust bank. So this is why we don't want to do anything extreme to lose weight, because it's going to influence, future food and exercise. So some of you guys are in a reverse diet. So that's the opposite of an actual diet. That's where we strategically increase calories, because we want to be able to lose weight at a higher, we want to be able to eat as much food as we possibly can and still lose weight when we're trying to lose weight. If we continue to cut and cut and cut and cut and cut and we get lower, that's going to influence future cuts. So if we have to get down to 800 calories, and this is where, I'm going to rail on again, extreme diets. If we get down to 800 calories and that's how we're losing weight, what do you think that we're going to have to do again in order to lose more weight? So when we are doing things like cutting carbs, removing entire food groups, going into these extreme measures, we are influencing our thyroid, we're influencing our adrenals, we're influencing our reproductive hormones. And these hormonal changes are going to affect how we respond to food in the future and how we respond to exercise. And so, again, that's why I'm such a big proponent of you guys doing things responsibly. All right, so just to recap, focusing on the big rocks. So the most underrated tools, I'm going to say it again, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT, AKA all the movement that you're doing outside of a workout, all the movement that you're doing outside of sleeping and eating. Sleep is the next most underrated tool. Again, this is not something, I always hesitate when I say things like that, because I do realize that so many people come to me with hormone dysfunction and sleep is a big pain point. So it's not saying that you're never going to get anywhere because you're struggling with sleep. Our goal is to get our sleep to a good place, so it's helpful. And that's why, we check on things like sleep and your biofeedback. And then stress management, again, focusing on what you can control, not what you can't. This is why in the coming months, we will have 2 special guests, aside from myself, that are going to be talking to you guys about stress management, boundaries, emotions, and things like that, because it is such a big tool in your overall fat loss toolbox. And I think you guys can really benefit from having other professionals come in and talk to you guys about ways to deal with stress, and some more about the science and the psychology of it, so that you're better equipped to deal with it, especially as we go into the coming months and dealing with the holidays. So that is all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions, do you want to drop in the chat? If you want to unmute, I'm more than happy to answer anything about anything I covered tonight, or any other questions that you have. It doesn't have to be about what I covered tonight. I'll check the app. Let me pull up the chat box. Make sure I didn't miss anything here.
I don't really have any questions, but I was looking forward to hearing more about what makes the scale go up and down.
Yeah.
Because I know after the years and years I spent in Weight Watchers, like that was the thing you checked every week to know if you were successful or not.
Yeah.
So it was really good to get an outside perspective on that. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not something that people talk about a lot, and so people get upset when the scale fluctuates, and it's normal. It's normal. So yeah. All right, just want to double check and make sure I don't have any questions here. Don't have any questions in my email. All right, if there are no questions tonight, I know tonight I yacked a little bit longer. I mean, I say that I usually yak this long anyway. But I will get this recording up out in the email, up in the portal, so you guys can listen again if you would like to hear me yak about this again. Otherwise, don't forget, we have a call next Tuesday. I know lots of people like to listen to these recordings on their morning walks, and I'm all for that. But if at all possible, please make sure that you're there live next Tuesday, because you will be able to ask somebody else questions, and I think that will be helpful. And then we'll also have a call next Thursday. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and I will see you guys again next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, guys.